My name's Simon. I'm going to be teaching MATLAB for the next few days. If you've taken any of the other collaboratory workshops, I'm a little different from some of the other fellows in that I'm not really a bioinformatician. I'm more of a computational biologist, so I do systems biology simulations, mainly focusing on the immune system. And so I use MATLAB all the time to solve a series of differential equations that represent the way the rate of change of certain proteins in the body. Okay, so the workshop doesn't presume any programming knowledge, so those of you who've programmed a little in MATLAB or something similar before might find the start a little slow, but we want to make sure everyone can get going. So even if you've had no programming experience, that's totally cool. We'll start from the very beginning. So the first question you might be asking yourself, although you're here, is why you'd want to learn MATLAB. And it's become the standard, de facto standard for computational biology and other related disciplines. Obviously here we focus on computational biology, but it's used widely in engineering and other similar disciplines. Basically, if you need a high-level programming language to analyze data and display your results, do lots of visualization of your data, then MATLAB is a great choice. It's a great one to pick up because it's an all-inclusive programming language and development environment. So many programming languages leave you to choose in what environment you want to develop it. You might, some people are writing in some very advanced development environments, while other people are writing in text editors. So in MATLAB, what you have is a bunch of development tools and debugging tools and code highlighting, and all the nice things you might expect from a good development environment is all built into the MATLAB software because it's a piece of software as well as just a coding language. It really excels at numerical manipulation. Most data can be broken down eventually into numerical manipulation, especially if that data can be thought of as arrays or matrices. MATLAB is very fast at that. The name comes from being a matrix laboratory. It has some great inbuilt plotting and visualization functions that can be much more difficult in other languages. To create 3D surface plots is one line of code, whereas in some other languages that can be fairly difficult to implement. There's a bunch of useful algorithms already coded into MATLAB. So if you want to do Fourier transforms, it's one line. You don't have to code your own FFT algorithm. I use it all the time for creating simulations. It's great for simulating the way things evolve over time, dynamical systems type applications. As I say, it has lots of built-in functions that let you do some of the more advanced things very easily. And if you reach the limits of what MATLAB can do, it interfaces very well with other languages. Lots of people, if you find engineers use it a lot because it's able to interface with their machinery. And if you're doing some more advanced microscopy, you can find there are toolboxes to interface with some of those devices. So it's very good at interfacing with other languages and other hardware. And you're even able to create full-on graphical user interface applications in MATLAB. And we'll touch on most of these things over the next few days. So the first thing I want everyone to do, and this is where we find out if everyone's got it installed, is to launch MATLAB. And you should either see an icon on your desktop, or if you're on a Mac, it's easy to press Command and space and start typing MATLAB and hit enter, and MATLAB will pop up. And you should see something that looks a little bit like this. Now it might look a little different depending on who last used your MATLAB environment and which version of MATLAB it is. But broadly, you should see this ribbon at the top with all the main functions you're going to be using. And then the window below will be split into a few different, probably 3 or 4 different panes. If you see something very different to this, I would encourage you to hit View and make sure it looks a little bit like this with a single and none here. And you can also return your editor to the default view using Layout. On the Home tab, there is a Layout button, and you can hit Default there, which will allow you to return your layout to the default layout and give you a few other options as well. Some people prefer the 3-column layout. This is what MATLAB used to look like, and their new default looks a little bit more like this. You may find when you open your editor, your MATLAB software, you don't see this editor window, and it might look something like this. That's just because you don't have a document you're currently editing. That's totally fine. I'll briefly introduce what the various parts of the display are. In the top left by default, but it might be somewhere slightly different in your screen, you'll see a current folder view, and that will show you what files are in your current working directory. So files that are there are files that you'll be able to run, files that you'll be able to work with. If you type something and you get that the file isn't found, make sure that you can see the file there. Yours might not be empty like mine. Yours might contain some files. What I would recommend doing when we start this workshop is in your current folder view, just do a right click and start a new folder. Give it a name, workshop, so that you can start with a nice empty space. So that's right click, new folder, create a folder with a name like workshop, then go into that folder and you should have a nice empty environment with no clutter in there, ready to start programming. So that's your current folder view. Again, if you're trying to work with something and you find that your code isn't working, make sure the files that you expect are in the current folder. Often you'll be mistaken and be running stuff from the wrong location. So in the bottom right, there's the command window. This is where we type a lot of our code. This functions like a calculator to some extent. So you can type brief pieces of code in here. If you're going to embark on a large project, if you're coding an entire suite of software, I wouldn't recommend typing it all into this command window. This is where you type 1 or 2 lines of code that you're experimenting with. Think of it like a graphing calculator or some advanced calculator where you're going to test commands before you put them in your final code. So this is the command window. You can always recognize it because it starts with a couple of those arrows at the start of the line. The workspace, in my window, that's at the bottom left. That will tell you which variables are defined in your current session. So I will talk about creating and updating variables in a moment, but if you want to know what variables are available, then MATLAB displays them nicely in this workspace view in the bottom left. So in some programming languages you can get confused about what's defined and what isn't, but MATLAB will nicely display them, and you can even interact with them through the workspace and do things like delete them, update their values, view them as tables, save them. There's lots of ways of interacting with your variables directly. They'll be visible in that workspace in a way that's easy to work with. And in the top right, if you've created, if you have this view, this is where you will type the larger scripts. So once you've figured out what sort of code you want to write in your command window, you might move up to the editor and begin writing your commands line by line here. This is where you will write any code that is more than a few lines. So this is basically a text editor like Notepad or any other text editor, but this one is inbuilt in MATLAB and provides lots of useful functions and line numbers and code highlighting that make working with MATLAB much easier.